We're live. Hello, folks. Today is Tuesday, December 7th, and with me today is Alexandre Voyer, owner of Analyse Cannabis. So, Alexander, welcome, and thanks for doing this.
Glad to be here. Thank you, Ron.
Absolutely. Once again, thank you. Thank you for doing this. I know a lot of people have been really interested in your work, and you're very invaluable to the industry. And I know a lot of people have nothing but great things to say. Really excited about the interview today. And like I said, trying to incorporate a little bit more interviews into my YouTube channel. Just for anybody at home, my name is Rod. I'm the owner of Power Group. And today we're going to be interviewing Alexandre Voyer. We'll jump right into it. First things first. So just before we get into some more detailed questions, where are you from and where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I'm from Gatineau in Quebec, so right next to Ottawa. So as you can tell from my very thick French-Canadian accent, I was born and raised in Gatineau. My dad is actually from Gaspésie, but he traveled to Gatineau. He actually went to Ottawa University. So that's where I happen, I guess, and I grew from there. I'm actually DBA by trade, as you'll see, and it's kind of a neat story how cannabis falls into my lap, and this whole project or this whole thing happened with Analyse Cannabis. So I'm really happy to be here and discuss this with you this morning, Ron.
Absolutely. And just for anybody at home, DBA, that's a database administrator. Yeah, you wouldn't really expect a DBA to fall into the line of work of MJ, but maybe you can elaborate that on that a little bit more. How did you get into the MJ space?
Yeah, so great question. So with the legalization of cannabis in Canada, it was really interesting to kind of see what was happening, especially in Quebec, because it's way different than other provinces. Yeah. It's kind of alone in the fact how it's standing and all the rules that we have over here. But a cool thing for me was that compared to like OCS or that, where they're really being vocal about the new things that are coming in, new products, availabilities, things like that. In Quebec, it's much more tame because of the law against promotion of cannabis. So what I did as a first step, just as a pet project of mine, I just created in 2019 a Twitter bot that would just tweet when there's a new product coming in, when it's available to be purchased online. At that point, there was no information about what's in the stores, only online availabilities. So I created that bot, and SQDC was happy enough that they reached out to me actually, and they said, man, that's pretty cool. Like, you're not part of the NELPs, you're not promoting anything. So I wouldn't go against that law of promotion of cannabis being outside of the sphere. So they actually made a publication about what I was doing. We had a great set of talks, and the community on Reddit, Facebook, whatever, really liked that idea of being able to see new products and what are coming in. And where Analyse Cannabis comes in is a bit like a year almost later. Okay. It started in June 2020 when SQDC added at the bottom of the page of each product, you can see which of the store carried that product. But there was no way at that point to see all the products in one store, which is kind of oversight, like it wasn't available. There was no My Store section, which is now available. But at that point, so one person from the community said, you did your Twitter bot, you're a programmer, like, can you do some type of portal where I can see all of what's available in my store or the stores that are near me? And Absolutely. Start with that. So I did a portal that's called Weed Crawler. It's free. You can go in and basically just see what's happening. And with that, you can kind of overview. And a fun fact is I do know that SQDC employees use that website because it's easier to go like there and kind of see, then go to your back room and see if you have things in store because it's synced up with the real like inventory. Right. And after that, shortly after, I got reached out by an LP, and they said, Alex, it's great what you're doing. Do you keep track of the fluctuation of the inventory? Can you guess the number of sales over time of the products? Trend. Because unfortunately in Quebec, they don't share that type of information. OCS does in Ontario, but in Quebec, it was decided that they wouldn't share competitor information or any inventory information. So what I ended up doing was, being a database guy, I keep data, that's my job. So I was keeping it for my own purpose. I didn't know that they didn't have it, but that's when I started building these reports where you can see the trend, the sales, and guesstimating how many sales happen over time, which allows the LPs to do that. And it allows me to do this publication, which some of you might have seen, the the best sellers for the week and things like that. It allows me to do those type of calculation, which are pretty, I would say my margin of error is fairly low. One thing I do with a friend of mine is we do, when StatsCan release their number for cannabis, he takes my numbers and he releases like a prediction, and it's never been inaccurate. So it's always been following the same trend, which is good. So it kind of talks to how my numbers are.
Yeah, that's
so,
awesome. Yeah, so basically you just have a passion for data, and you more or less accidentally fell into the MJ space, and then as a result, Analyse Cannabis was born, right? So
exactly. So it was kind of born as a need, and the plan for me was not to monetize that at all. It was to help the community, and that's always the goal. That's why I have that free section that is still there, and I share as much information as I can, because I think everyone gains from that sphere. It's so new. Everything's very exciting, but it's still in the baby phase, what I call it. And the more info people have, the better they will react. So
that's pretty much the same for me, and why I started my YouTube channel. It was just a passion for helping people, and I accidentally stumbled into investing, and I really developed a passion for it, and just dealing with people, interacting with yourself, even doing these interviews is something I'm just really passionate about the MJ industry. And we were talking before about how passionate people are, and it's really amazing to see, because it's really unprecedented, right? We haven't seen that in any other industry. If we use alcohol as an example, how many people are messaging you like strangers, asking you about how much Smirnoff was sold last month, right? There's
exactly.
not very common, right?
No.
So, yeah, the community in the MJ space is really bar none. It's quite amazing, really, what we have in our hands. And like you said, I think we're still in the infancy stages. So
exactly.
All right.
And
Well,
I'm happy to be here, and I know you are too. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, next, so we'll change gears a little bit here. So maybe we'll ask you a little bit more of the tougher questions. So again, I reached out to some of the community and compiled some questions as well, because I know a lot of people are very interested in your work. So one of the questions that we had was, what would the Retican Readies sales look like in Quebec if they had roughly the same percentage market share as the current number one in Quebec? And do you have any idea when Retican may be available in Quebec?
Yeah, great question. So one of the things I first did when you kind of shared that question with me, because obviously there is data driven, so I kind of had to dig through. I weeded out some of the first number, because the number one actually right now is a 0.5, one pre-roll of 0.5 gram.
Oh, really? Okay.
Which is nowhere near what Readies are. They are mostly like 10.4 gram, if I'm not mistaken. So what I did is I took the current, like the nearest competitor, natural competitor, which is Good Supply Jean-Guy, which was in the top selling.
Right.
They sell an average of 18,000 units per month across all of the retail location of SQDC. So it's a bit more expensive than the Readies. So that's where it kind of, like, the good news I feel for Retican and Readies is the price point that they put is so much lower for the quantity that I have a feeling it would sell, if not 18,000 units per month, it would probably sell more, only because of that advantage that they have. So in the ballpark, that's where I would kind of situate it as, like, at least between 18 and 20 plus thousand units per month. So and for the second part of the question, one of the things, unfortunately, as you know, Quebec is very strict with the rules, and now it can be implemented. The only problem I see with Retican, the Readies, is they look like cigarette a lot. And in Quebec, that's something that I know the government won't like, because it promotes the usage. It's kind of similar to a product that already exists in the market, being cigarettes. So that's always, I think, I'm not in I don't know all the secrets, but that's one thing that's in my radar, that I know that Quebec, it's like back 40, their payroll, they would have the same problem, basically, because they have that same type. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what's stopping them. I know there are some talks happening, but in the timeline is kind of blurry at this point. So I wouldn't be able to commit to like, hey, it's coming soon or not. I think they have to go through that hurdle first and kind of sell that product correctly to the SQDC like people
That's a good point.
for that to happen. So that's the tricky part. So hopefully soon, but yeah.
And that's usually the case, right? Everybody thinks like, why aren't we there yet? We're in every other province. Why aren't we in Quebec?
Exactly.
And there's always a lot more that meets the eye, right? And that's a great point. And I actually just thought of another question with regards to the back 40s and the OCS data. Are you able to see the sales in terms of the readies versus the back 40? Is back 40 starting to catch up to the Retican readies? I know competition, a lot of people view competition as a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. And I think that, Hexos really innovative in that regard, and they usually are first to market. They're usually that leader. So I think it's a positive sign that we have competition. But have you seen Auxly sort of match those numbers of Retican readies?
Yeah,
or
so as I can see, and to be transparent, the data I'm gathering from the other provinces are fairly new. I haven't started with that process. I started 2 months ago, gathering more metrics Canada-wide with something that I call a best bang for your bud.com, which is similar to iBuddy, to like price competitor. So what I see as for trend, going back to your question, is yes, it's catching up. You can see that the market has some, like they like that format that's a bit slimmer than the Retican. So it's easier to do that one session like really quickly. I think that's where they kind of hit like the right spot. The price point is also very competitive, of course. I think Retican is still like doing very well. So I don't think they should be worried about it. I think it's, like you said, it's very healthy to have competition. It brings to light what type of product it is. So I think it's good. But yes, you can see the trend, and you can kind of see, it's kind of funny because when people thought about pre-roll at first, it was more that cone shape, like very Netherlands, like very like European type of rolling, or maybe like California, very typical of weed, like having that cone shape. But it was interesting to see a player like Retican bring up more like, okay, is it a smoke, like something that's more easier to store, easier to package, like to have a uniformize. That was a interesting decision. I think it paid well. So of course competitors will copy that same type of thing because it works. But yeah, so in short answer would be yes. I think that like from what I've seen, the sales from those back 40 are growing. I don't think they're eating too much of the Retican, to be honest. Like I think both are performing just as equally well. And it made me think of one comment, like regarding the problem with Quebec of Retican. The readies for like Christmas theme, things like that. I don't think Quebec is a huge fan of those because it promotes like, again, festive, things like that. Not that Quebec is boring, but the law make it that it's very difficult to go around those type of restriction. So that's one thing also to keep in mind.
Well, that's similar to the XMGs, right? They're XMG, meaning Roman numeral 10, right? 10 milligrams, but in Quebec, it's 5 mg, right?
Exactly.
So, it's not the first time we've seen this, and probably won't be the last, right? So it's there's a lot of red tape, right? There's a lot of hoops and boundaries to navigate, right? So hopefully, as the industry matures, that we'll get a little bit more of that stigma will go away, hopefully. And
and I think like one thing for the LP to keep in mind too is like Quebec right now is a black box, but it's still a world of opportunity. I think a lot of LPs are scared because of all the restriction, but once you know the game and how it's played in Quebec, I think there's a lot of opportunities for it to happen.
Once you align yourself, with the regulations,
exactly,
you've got a huge advantage, right? You've got a major advantage if you can learn to play within the rules. Well, if so many other people are timid and shy away from that market, well, you basically have a monopoly at that point, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So, that's great. So next, are we still seeing craft? I know some of the licensed producers said that they were surprised by the rise of craft cannabis and some of those producers. Would you say that they're still stealing market share from the large caps? And if so, is that trend starting to slow down at all, or would you say it's accelerating?
Yeah, so I think stealing is a tough word, but yes, I think they are eating the margins for sure. Like but it's kind of like to me, that problem is not, and I guess I'll go on a tangent. It's not craft versus the big LPs. It's more like there's LPs that have only one SKU, so they can focus on one SKU, be very good at it, and come out with this. And they have there's larger LPs out there who chose to focus on multiple SKUs, which is like juggling with a lot of balls at the same time and trying not to drop any, which is a much bigger, it's
Challenge.
a bigger challenge. Yeah, good word. And so that's the part I'm seeing from what I'm seeing from the community and from my numbers. If a player comes in right off the bat with a good product and is consistent with it, the sales will be good. For bigger LP, the challenge was, I think at first, the strategy was very similar to what's in the liquor strategy. So you kind of not flood, but you try to have as many SKUs as possible to see what how the public will react, which one sticks, right?
Yeah.
But then if the customers stick to one product, which they love, but you'd lose consistency, then you lose that as well. So it's like a tough game. It's a hard game to play. And I think that's something that the bigger LPs, like you said, there was the ankle biter comment and things like that. They didn't, for some reason, they didn't see that happening. They were focused too much on their product and what was going on and what was going wrong, and without looking elsewhere.
Yep.
And they lost track of that thought. And I think that's what's been hurting them a lot. So going back to your question, I think craft or little LPs or single SKU focus LPs are hurting the bigger LPs still. The margin, like you can see, the trend is harsh. And one example I like to give in Quebec is going to the hashish. So if you go to the hash category, at first it was only OSH. So Exo had the monopoly, you have the thing, it was doing okay. Like I think hash was very new in Quebec when it came like with that concept.
Yeah.
So they were selling like maybe 14,000 units a month of the OSH. And they had like a couple of months where they were lonely. So I think you enjoy that, right? You're alone. So of course you get the 100%. But then you have someone like T-God who came in with Afghan Black.
Yep.
It still didn't eat the margin of Exo, so it didn't go down right away. Exo actually got to produce more, and they were selling like I think in the 20,000 units per month, so it went up. So they were doing fine. So I think what they saw was like, man, we're doing okay. Like this is fine. But then you have other players that started coming in because it's one of the category that's lacking competition. So you have Tremblant Cannabis that came in, single SKU, very focused with what they did, and they just killed the game. Like they're selling, I think that the average was 30,000 units a month right now. And OSH went down. It started crippling. But then the issue Exo, I guess the strategy Exo did is they released 5 SKUs. So they released 5 new ash.
Yeah.
Okay, one of them, I think it's Atlantis, works really well. So you keep that, but the other one will suffer because then they don't perform as good. And if you combine all the sales of those 5 SKUs, it doesn't equalize the Tremblant Cannabis. So that effort is kind of lost. I feel I think it's a different strategy. Did it pay off or not? Personally, I don't think so, but it's part of the game, right? They try things, they see what sticks. And I'm just hoping they get to be more focused over time with one certain SKU. So
I think Hexo had some issues with their THC amount, right?
Exactly.
It was pretty low.
Yes.
And that caused a lot of people to go look elsewhere too.
Yeah, and one of the thing I like to say too is the Hexo in Quebec, I guess in Ontario too, when you bring out the product to the shelf, you need to give a range of THC so that the customer knows what range they will get from that. Yep. I think one of the mistakes Exo did was that range was too big. So usually it's, I would say under 5%, that range should be like a 15 to 20, 20 to 25, something like that. Some of the products from Exo was 10 to 20. If the consumer buys it at 20, they're happy. But if they come back and it's 10, they will say like, man, like this is like a surprise box, right? Like you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah,
and I think exactly. And that's one thing big LPs are starting to realize is that concept of the surprise box. It doesn't work well. It works well maybe for if you want to do a mix like 28 gram or something. Maybe it will, like a budget ounce, like what they did in Ontario with Bake Sell.
They know what they're getting though, right? Yeah.
It's exactly. In the price. Yeah. Exactly. And I think what they're seeing now, again, is that consistency,
Yeah.
is making sure your product is always consistent. It pays off so well compared to whatever you want. So yeah,
Yeah, those, it's all in the details, right? Those, I even,
exactly.
you know, you get those humidity packs. It's I think that's something that should be in every single bag, right? And especially in
Yeah,
a 28 gram format. I think, you know, if any licensed producers are listening to this video, that's maybe that's something you can learn and put,
yeah,
you know, very small gesture, very small detail, but I think that would go a long way and really resonate with consumers, right? So.
exactly. Yeah.
And on the topic of Hexo, with the new strains that they've released and they're releasing, like the powdered donuts, the garlic jelly, and the Durban poison, do you see any, like, do you expect them to gain back any market share with the release of those strains?
I think it never hurts to have new exciting products. That's like a rule. Like especially like to me, it's kind of fun. It's fun because we're getting away from the thematic, what I would call, because like 2019, I don't know about the other provinces. I didn't monitor that much, but in Quebec, 2019, 2020 was like all Kush, pink Kush, purple Kush, whatever Kush you wanted, you had it. And
That's
then
my
it
favorite.
was, yeah. So then it was, and then after that, it was more focused on cookies. And then like all the, and then you had like the wedding
Gelato.
cake, yeah,
Yeah.
gelato, things like that. So they were like thematic, and you can see that the consumer do change their preferences according to what's in vogue. So having products that are kind of bringing new things to the table, I think never hurts. That's like a number one rule. The only thing, and it kind of goes back to the previous question, I think the thing they need to focus in, or the real challenge, is I get like to ensure that the consumer knows what to expect
Yeah.
batch to batch. So I call it like I would like, if I was in the position of someone at EXO or any big LPs or any LPs in general that are up and coming and having a new product that they want to put up the shelf, I would probably suggest like three things. Like the first one would be do a triage of your buds correctly, so the consumer knows that the type of buds, like you don't have shake one time and then a huge bud the other time, and like again, surprise, right? You don't want the surprise. So have some sort of triage. And to be frank, I was really surprised that not all LPs have some sort of set things in place to triage the bud. Like it's not, it's coming, but yeah, it's something that wasn't there. I would
Or
say
like
be
a
more
quality
aggressive.
control or.
Exactly. Yeah. And even like the machinery, sometimes there's a way to triage like so then you keep the big buds at like, there's a way to separate them. So then at
Yeah.
least it's always very
And you can use
consistent.
the shake for, you know, beverages or hash.
You transform. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it's not going to
I
go to
would,
waste, or it shouldn't go to waste.
exactly. Yeah. So I would compare it to like the food industry, right? If your tomatoes aren't pretty, well, make tomato juice, make something else with it. You don't need to keep it and try to shove it to your custom,
Yeah.
like
I mean,
consumer.
just a
Yeah,
plant, right? It's a
exactly.
commodity, so we need to treat it like one.
Exactly. And unfortunately, consumer wants pretty things. That's the reality. There's no going around that. So the bag appeal and things like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, so it goes back to what you were saying, being more aggressive with your QA, like the trim, the color, the smell, the humidity, very important. And also like what I would do, like we touched on this previously, but be aggressive with that, like the power to reduce your THC range and the CBD range. So again, consumer knows what to expect batch
Yeah.
after batch. And it's difficult. I realize that. And especially for EXO and bigger LPs, they have a lot of products to manage. It's difficult to manage that. So it's finding that middle ground where you're comfortable with every single strain and you're able to come up with a product that's always consistent. That's because in Quebec, the best sellers like Oh My Kush Cookie, batch after batch, very consistent, good numbers. Like it's kind of like the rule of thumb there.
Right.
And yeah, and there's also the fact that unfortunately in Quebec we cannot educate people about other things than THC. So it's like people going to liquor store and saying, I want your IS proof vodka. Like they don't like at that point, but because of the law, we cannot educate. So in Quebec, higher THC, like everywhere in Canada, still is king. So until then, focus maybe on that a bit more to see if you can get them
Absolutely.
up and get them going.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah, focusing on the consumer, obviously a very important aspect of
Yeah.
it. And then, like you say, with the just a little bit harder for those larger caps, right? Because of the supply chain and how long it takes to get things in and out. It's
And
challenging,
like
but
there's
it seems
challenge
like
for
they're getting the hang of it. I guess they're certainly
yeah,
improving.
yeah, and like even because I know like some of them, unfortunately, they have a lot of things in their vault. So I think, like you said, maybe like doing oils or doing something else with that, not trying to sell it to consumer directly, it will help. Like the pre-roll is a really nice route either too. Like that's I
Yes,
think it's
yeah,
a smart
exactly.
move. So there's opportunities. It's just a matter of seeing, and also because like brand loyalty is very hard to get and very easy to lose. So that's always something to keep in mind.
People
Uh,
remember the bad things, not necessarily the
yeah, and
good things,
exactly.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, bad news travels fast.
yeah.
And with regards to quality of Hexo, I know a lot of people in the past have, for lack of a better word, just really despised the quality of some of the
Mhm.
products, like the earlier buds, like the Atlantis
Yeah,
and some of those. Have you noticed any quality improvements in Quebec, and
yeah.
any of those new products that have been switched out recently?
Yeah, so there was a lot of great effort by Exode from what I've seen to actually pull things off the shelves that they deemed the quality was not good enough. There's also there was the trend of pulling like those 28-gram, for example, that were like nicks or like they couldn't say what it was. For whatever reason, for better or worse, in Quebec, they decided now that the 28-gram, even though it's the same barcode, it can change the strain batch to batch. So now LPs like Hexo can identify which batch of like what it is in the bag,
Yep.
which makes it easier for consumer. So that was a good call on Hexo. I think they were one of the first one to do that change on their labeling and bring that back. So and they changed from the famous containers, like those huge container of Hexo
Oh yeah.
to bags. I think that was a great move. So even though I'm not a heavy smoker, like I do enjoy my vape there, but my stash doesn't seem to go down for whatever reason. I did notice that the quality seems to be improving. Like if I'm looking at reviews or like the strategies that Exo is making,
Yep.
and I think it's a good call. Like I'm just I wish it would have happened sooner, but I understand it's a big ship
Oh,
to
absolutely.
move. But yeah, I'm seeing like notable like the quality seems to be better, and the reviews I see are much more positive. Like sure you'll get the exo bashing or the big LP bashing
Yep.
comments. I think those are a given. You're in a competitor market, people will bash the big guys, but like you got to hand it to them when they do a good job, and I think they're doing a better job at what the
Well, I
quality.
think a lot of it has to do with the target market too, right? You look at Budweiser; they don't necessarily have the best
Exactly.
beer, but they sell
Yeah,
the most and they make the most money. And
exactly.
then once they had that leading market share, then they were able to go and acquire companies and these more specific brands.
Exactly.
And once they have the distribution and the foundation, right, then it's just a matter of either acquiring or adding, a new product or a new category,
Yeah.
and then just pumping the volume, right? So
It's a great point because like one of the joke I always say, because people like in my list every week, Good Supply is usually the like Jean-Guy by Good Supply, usually the first one. And
yeah,
people are like, man, people are buying this, blah blah blah. And I'm like, dude, this is like the course light of the cannabis.
yeah,
It's not the best. It's you don't go that. It's at the right price point. The quality is okay, and it does the job. Like they have such a high volume, and Exo can do that as well. They have such a high volume that they just destroy the other guys because they are able to sell a lot.
oh,
So
absolutely.
so people need to realize that like there's space for craft and there's space for the Coors Light and the normal like buds there.
Exactly, yeah.
It's yeah, yeah,
And there's more to it than just creating really, fantastic
yeah,
flower, right? You need to be able to have
exactly.
the inventory, you need to be able to constantly restock shelves,
Yeah,
right? So if
yeah,
something is extremely popular, like we've seen that with Canara Biotech, right?
yeah,
They're that's their bottleneck at the moment, is they're just not able to produce, hence the reason why they're buying Valleyfield and
yeah,
expanding their production capacity.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
and then, with example of Canara, they only have access to Quebec market and Ontario, I believe. I think they
yeah,
might have actually entered into Manitoba, I think,
yeah, yeah.
uh, and Saskatchewan,
So
but those things take time, right? So
and I think it's that was one of the thing that almost played to their demise at one point. The fact that they couldn't supply, and then people get kind of irritated, like, okay, like it's a great product, but like it's never there. So like I'm gonna switch. They got lucky because they have a very different branding. Everything is a bit different. But if it was another LP, they might have crashed and then people move to something else. It's always a part of the danger. So making sure your supply chain, like I think people in the community, sometimes we tend to oversimplify the process of how things work, only because we compare it to legacy market. Legacy market is very easy. There is no like restriction. You do whatever you want, you package however you like. Like there's all these safeguards being that it's regulated, that they are in place. So I think sometimes we don't give enough, we don't think that there's enough work put in. And I really want, like each time I talk to an LP, I always raise my hat because I'm like, man, you guys are like the troopers putting all of these steps in place to make sure everything is okay. And people don't like, they give you flack, but at the end of the day, you're doing like awesome job because I couldn't do it myself.
Take it for granted somewhat.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And like, I've got, a bag of the bake sale with Hexo, and
Nice.
this in Alberta, I'm not sure if you know, but the price of this in Alberta, I got it for $57.
That's crazy.
And 5% sales tax. So it was $60. And you're not getting any. I've noticed the quality of this has improved quite a bit. Like they're really big buds. I had a pack of zigzag papers and the bud was pretty much the same size as the pack of papers, one of the buds. But yeah, I mean, you got to kind of have that happy medium. Like you said, you can't be all things to everyone. But I think it's a good point, is to have a happy medium. And there's a lot more to it than just making a great strain or having a great strain, right? You need to figure out what people want, and then are you going to be able to produce it and scale and have the distribution that you need? And that's something that with regards to Cannara, I'm very bullish on Cannara, but that has always been a concern of mine. And I think that they still have some challenges ahead of them, and craft in general, just because, like you said, when people buy something, they don't like surprises, but they also don't like when they buy something and then they have to wait 3 weeks for them to get it the next time, right? Then they might get tired of that, and then they might find something else, right?
The good news for them in Quebec, at least, is they seem to be finally handling that situation. Like you can see, like I could see from my report, the ups and downs of like them being the best seller, and then they would sell anything because there's nothing to sell. So, which is good problem to have, but at the same time you want to sell out all the time. So I think with Valleyfield opening, they're starting to get more traction, or at least more stability, which is what I was looking for too. Like I was looking forward to that, because otherwise, man, it's going to be a tough time for these guys if they cannot achieve that. I'm curious about their performance with the rest of Canada. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, I'm really excited.
Yeah, but it's interesting. Like for me, following even the big guy to the smaller guys is always interesting, because like you said, it's still in its infancy, like the MJ space. So it's always kind of neat to see which trick they pull out of their hats, or what's happening, or like these trends that they are setting. So that's something cool. And one thing that I noticed in Quebec is adding the terpenes, for example, the percentage. That wasn't like part of that trend. Like it was in Ontario, it was elsewhere. Like you could see some of the packaging would say that, but no one was doing it. And then someone like Cannara, I think, decided to do it at once. They put like when it was cured, when it was whatever. And then I was like, man, like each time I was talking to other LPs, I was like, I know you have the packaging issue where the label takes a lot of space and things like that. But if these guys can do it, you don't lose anything by doing it, by adding this to your thing. So
they had it right on the label, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So and I mean, someone like myself, right? I've been consuming cannabis for over a decade, right? Probably close to 15 years. And I consider myself a connoisseur. So I've actually, grown my own as well. Not doing that at the moment, just because I got so much stuff going on and it's so cheap to buy now. It's almost not even worth it, but more of just a hobby than anything. But, I didn't want to grow mediocre stuff, right? I wanted the best of the best, right? And I think Cannara uses Hexos genetics. So that's a company that they get a lot of their genetics from. And they've sort of, crossed their own strains and made their own unique strains to them. But, not everybody wants 30% THC, right? And if you look at Cannara, they're tailoring to that more experienced and weed connoisseur, right? Whereas like a Hexo, their market is the people who don't already consume cannabis. They're looking at the green type of investor or a smoker, right, or consumer, and they just want to be a mass market type of thing. So again, I think large caps, small caps, both have a place in your portfolio. And I think, there's going to be that niche market that's going to, I think it's a really strong market, especially in MJ. You get how many people are so passionate about craft beer. You look at how popular craft beer is. And I don't think that's a fad. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. So
I don't think either.
So no, that's great. So in terms of, I know you might not be able to answer all of these questions, and this might be one of those more difficult ones, but in terms of the 80-20 rule, what demographic is the 20% that generates about 80% of the total company revenues, and any idea on like yearly spend estimates, breakdown percentage versus craft and premium, that type of thing?
So unfortunately, I don't track the profile of the people who purchase the thing. I only track the inventory, so I have no idea if it's a woman, a man, the age, everything that goes in. So I won't be able to answer on that front. I would say like for the craft versus like mass produce, I guess. Craft is still low. Like I would say that below 30% of the sale. The mass produce being is just that volume is so big for like those bigger LP, or like they can bring that, so they like it doesn't even compare to some degree. The only like especially in dry flower and beverages is all owned by like these big LPs. Like there's no craft there, and I don't think there's the space with the regulation right now to have craft, unfortunately, in those categories. And we don't have edibles in Quebec. Like so there's a lot that I'm not seeing. It's a bit different. So yeah, in hashish, like I said, Laurentian, I wouldn't call them like big guys yet. So they're still doing very well. Like they have like almost, if I look at, I think it's more than 70% of the sale. Like they have a lot. They have a lot. So so for that, I think like we discussed, I think it's good to compete craft with the big one, but I don't think it's talking about the same, like it's not the exact same. So
apples
it's
and oranges, essentially.
Exactly, like sure they belong to the same category, but at the end of the day, I don't think they like if you put it to infinity, they should not eat all the big LP. Like there's just no way, because they cannot produce enough. Like it's just not the reality. It's different spec.
Well, it's like comparing an LP to an MSO too, right? It's
exactly. So, and the only place where I can comment is if I look at the above $40 for 3.5 gram, like those products, craft took over. Like they took over like that. I don't think Exo even wants to go there, because man, it's just a premium. Like there's like that thing. So, but the numbers, like if I look at the lot 420, they week by week, I think they sell less than 5,000 units, but that's just because they don't produce like it, and the consumer, I don't think it's not there yet. It's very luxury. So I think what you'll find is most of the craft will be $30 and above usually.
Right.
And then the other like big LPs will be under $30, and then that's why it's kind of separated that way. And to me, it makes natural sense. Like if you go buy a Labatt Bleu at the grocery store and you buy a micro beer, the price is not the same. Like it's not, so exactly. So sorry, it doesn't answer fully the question, but that's
that's great. No, that's at least that'll put some minds to rest. And I know some people were curious too, how you get away with using that SQDC data. So you had mentioned earlier that it was because you're not actually like doing any kind of promotional activities.
Exactly. So it's kind of twofold. So first, the information is public, like the number of units available in a store is public. It's also there's nothing with their terms and agreement. Like they don't say like there's nothing that says like you cannot grab that information. And to be frank, I don't want to be too blunt, but even if they're aware, I'm not doing anything to harm the website. I'm not hacking. I'm not doing anything that's malicious to them. And
Right.
I even put safeguard because like my goal is not to make their site unavailable, which would be like a horror story for me because
Oh
then
yeah.
they see me as like this guy who's trying to harm their website.
Yeah, like
So
a DDoS attack or something.
exactly. So I have safeguards in place where it's not crawling all the time and it's not impacting those hour usage. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of
You run
being
it
like,
after hours and
exactly. And I'm being like I'm making a lot of my effort was into that because I'm in that sphere, I'm in IT, so I know the pain that I can cause. So I'm being to be like very nice with them. And the other part that I think plays in my favor is uh, like I said, this business was not sprung day one, like, hey, I want to monetize this thing.
yeah,
It was meant for the community. There's free sections, there's things that the community
yeah.
can look at.
Just a genuine
Uh,
interest in it, right?
exactly. And I don't, like you said, I don't promote anyone. Like even it, like I wouldn't be paid to promote someone. Just let's put it that way. I try to be as neutral as can be, and I'm not employed by any of these guys. So that's why like I can stay very transparent with my answers, and yeah,
For
I'm not
sure.
limited.
And you and I work in the tech industry, right? You're a
Yeah.
DDA and I'm a server guy. So for the less technical savvy people at home, how would you break that down in layman's terms? So you essentially created a bot, which
Exactly.
is a crawler. It basically scrapes all this data from the website,
Yes.
from
So
SQC or
on
OCS.
a very high level, the way I do is I have a bunch of little robots that are on servers, and those robots query the SQDC website, each product, but they don't download the whole page. So one of the things that could be harmful would be like downloading all the images, all the whatever, like everything at once, and kind of doing what you call a DDoS, which is like almost like flooding, putting too much pressure on the website.
Yep.
So I have ways that I don't download these images. I only take the text, which is very
Right.
easy.
Yep.
And then I extract the data that I need from the text, and then I
Parse it
compile
from there.
that.
Yeah.
And in a database, I just track over time. So if it like, and I'm always like, that's why there's no secret sauce or anything. There's some low level secret sauce about it, but like in general, it's as simple as there was 15 units 5 minutes ago. There's now 10 units available. I know that there were 5 units that disappeared or were sold. So
Okay.
that's how I do it.
And do you use AWS for those
I
bots?
use so I use a couple of clouds provider, AWS being one. But yeah, so it's a combination, and also it's not to, it's just they're so cheap. So like it's not even to evade or be like it's just the price point of AWS is the cheapest of the bunch for most of the use case. So and that's what I use in my day-to-day work as well. So I'm kind of familiar with, but I do use other providers. And one other thing, so my relationship with SQDC is very neutral. I don't think, like, I think they're happy that I provide like things for the community, but they cannot be associated with me only because of that law and thing like that. So
Okay.
yeah,
That makes sense. Okay, that's great insight. Thank you. I know people will appreciate that at home, that a little less on the tech side of things, right?
yeah.
So what licensed producer, either like a large cap or small cap, surprised you the most, like in terms of growth momentum over your tenure in the MJ space?
Yeah. So well, I guess going back to the craft thing, so the single, like, to me the most like eye-opening moment was when those single SKU LPs came in and they kind of rode that thing. So like one of the one I was like a wow moment for me was really the Green Tone, Enterprise Green Tone with the Oh My Kush Cookie.
Yep.
They came in, I was like, okay, these guys, the price point is okay at like $20 flush for like the 3.5. And they had nothing else, right? At first, they only had the 3.5 gram. That's it, one strain, Kush Cookie. And they just said, okay, we're going to go in with this. And the volume that they could pump was insane. They dedicated the whole place just for that strain. That's basically what happened. And so they were able to go to every single store very quickly. And they didn't have a supply chain. Like they really tweaked everything that they had and they make sure. And it took like, it's almost as, yeah, it's often like the number one or number two week by week compared to the Jean-Guy Good Supply, which I call the Coors Light. So it was interesting to see that one SKU surpassed the Coors Light and to say, man, I'm going to go in. And then the smart thing they did was to release a 28 gram without saying, because at that time you couldn't say the strain, but you know that this guy only cultivates that one strain. So it was a good call, because then the consumer could know what strain was in that 28 gram compared to what Exo had, or like all these other, the bigger LPs that were limited of not saying the strain. It was only mixed or mélangé. So then it was harder for consumer. So then consumer would only buy the 28 gram because they knew that was the rate, the strain they wanted. So it was like it was a really good move. Like, I don't know how much of that was calculated, but it was just like, man, like super cool. And the other one that I really liked was like Canara, I think everyone knows, so I'll go over it because it was just a great story with the packaging, tuna can, thing like that. They came out with different things that were legacy market influenced. So that was cool too. But Lot 420 was a really cool one for me, because these guys at $42, I'm like, man, that's super expensive for Quebec. Like there's, and at first I was like, guys, like, do you think you're gonna, like, I was discussing with them, I was like, this is a high price point. Like you're kind of putting like,
3.5,
right? Yes. Super expensive. Like I know other provinces are more expensive than that, but like in Quebec, that's like in the expensive range. But they believe so much in their product. They were like, man, and also it was, I think the range was really short, I think between 28 and 30% of THC. And they were the first brand to put 30. So in Quebec, the max is 30% you can have for something. So usually what Exo and the other guys do is 29. They don't say they want to hit that 30. And these guys were bold enough to say, we have a batch that's 30 on the dot, and we're going to put 30 on the website. So I think that got the consumer really excited with like what happened, and it brought momentum. And they use my data to know, like, okay, Broken Coast, how many units do they sell? So then they can kind of align, okay, we're going to sell just as much. So then we have a place in that segment. And they realize that's when it kind of
took
took
off.
off.
What price point those are at and what's working.
Yeah. So that was really interesting. I think it's the other things I'm looking forward to is, I think, the oil segment, the like extracts, like all these extract, like hashish oil, capsules, are kind of gaining traction. Like I'm seeing a little bit. Like it's interesting. It's never as much as like dry flower, of course.
Now,
but,
I bought a bottle of the raindrops, the Retican raindrops. At Value Buds here in Edmonton or Alberta, it was $10 for the bottle, and then those used to cost $50 and $60 when we first legalized in Canada, right? So for $10, I mean, you can incorporate, that'll probably last you a week or two, and so for $20 a month, you can have CBD in your life all day, every day for the entire month.
Exactly. So it's gonna be like, I'm excited about those segments, and if the regulation change, beverages will be excited. Like at that point, unfortunately, the only good thing I can say about beverages, which is the move that the Exo made with XMG, smaller container, pack it with 10 gram in Ontario, 5 gram in Quebec, but pack it with as much THC as you can, but bring the size factor down. So it's almost like a shot or a smaller thing.
And you can buy more too. The consumer can buy more, because an XMG has, I think, 3 grams of dried cannabis equivalency. Whereas if you buy a Molo 2.5 milligram, it's considered 5.1 grams of.
That calculation is insane. So it was a good move to do that. And in Quebec, the 2 XMG are always best sellers. Like it's
and that's another point about comparing apples to oranges, right? I was just in Colorado, I was just in Vegas for MJ BizCon, and you can buy edibles there with 100 milligrams in a package, right? So how do you compete with that? Plus you got MedMen on billboards driving down the road. You'd never see that happen in Canada, right? And maybe we will get to the 100 milligram per package eventually. I think we will, because I mean, if you walk into a liquor store, you can buy 90 proof moonshine. So I don't think there's going to be I don't think that it's going to be something that's going to be an issue for a very long time. I think they'll eventually start to ease the restrictions, but it's pretty amazing that the constraints again, a lot of people from, maybe you're not from Canada either. A lot of people are down in the States and they're wondering why sales are so impacted, but they don't factor in that, Quebec will only allow the 5 milligrams, I think, in beverages, 30% THC maximum. If you go to Planet 13, they've got bud there with 35% THC, right? So there's always usually a lot more than what meets the eye, right? And you're comparing apples to oranges versus apples to apples, right? So
exactly,
something that I've always been just very, I sound like a broken record a lot of the times, just telling people, right, that because I'm from Canada, I focus a lot on LPs, but I also hold MSOs as well. I see the value. I think there's value in owning, again, just like there's value in owning large caps and small caps, there's value in owning MSOs and LPs. I think they both fit in your portfolio. And with regards to MSOs, do you think that, and some of our viewers at home might be wondering why we're not talking about MSOs? Well, first off, we're from Canada and you likely don't have access to that information, correct?
Yes, that's correct. So
is that something that you think you'd have access to in the future?
I guess one of the good problem for me to have is I'm always looking to more data and more information, of course. In the short future, right now my focus is mostly in building. Like I built Quebec, it's very sturdy. Like the data I'm getting for Quebec is very good, very accurate. What I'm looking is I open the doors to other provinces. So like with that new project of mine, Best Bang for Your Bud, and like with that it's a lot of, like in Quebec, it's same product, same naming convention, same thing across all retailers. In other provinces, people name things differently, like the dispensary are all privately owned. And so I'm kind of looking into that. I'm not selling anything regarding that yet. Like right now, it's not my priority. It's against the community, making sure I have a decent product to provide to the community. So natural step would be to do like, like the MSO and all these, like the more I can add, right, that brings more value to what I give. So there's always room to grow. And I'm even kind of entertaining the idea to have US based data with the CBD, like things like that can come in. So sky is the limit with what's possible. Is just right now I'm kind of one man army, kind of going there and doing as best as I can. So,
and then we gotta factor in the EU and all these other international markets.
Exactly. So that, like all that to say, I think there's a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of room to grow. Like every time I see an article that's like the market is saturated, I'm like, man, like it's in infancy. There things will change. Things will be like, don't panic for things like that. Like it's only what, the third year or fourth year. Like there, it's not. Like it's nothing. So
give it time. Introduced 2.0, right? So
exactly.
There's still so much we don't know.
That hasn't been tapped. Like Quebec market doesn't have like the vape, the electronic vapes and things like that. Like so there's room. Like I think there's opportunities out there. It's a matter of being focused and just making sure you have a decent, what you're bringing to the table is decent, because we're not at the first year where it was free for all and anything could sell. And that's one thing I like to address is I think at first people didn't have data. So the consultant, things like that were helping the company work. I don't call them like snake oil, like salesmen or things like that, but it seems like they were kind of saying like, hey, sky's the limit. You'll sell everything you want to sell. You'll sell out. It's very easy. Consumer are eager to buy. That's just not true at this point. You need to do your proper, like you need to learn what they want. You need to do your tick your boxes and make sure everything's okay.
And black market, I think, really surprised people as well. It took a little bit longer, I think, than most people thought to convert those people. And that's something I've seen a huge improvement on, and downtrend is the black market, right? That we've seen a huge
and I think there's still a value in spying on the black market. There's still some great trends. At the end of the day, the goal of legalizing is getting rid of the black market, which I think is it's the same with alcohol, right? You want to get rid of it. but you should still learn from it. It's not away yet. There are some strains that are emerging. Take from that and make it happen, and then the consumer will move to the legal market.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's a good segue into my next question. So what are your current thoughts on the, it's been a brutal slide the last 11 months since the February highs, but what are your current thoughts on the MJ market? And what do you think is in play for the year ahead? Do you think 2022 is going to be favorable for the cannabis industry?
Yeah, so I think everyone got a reality check. I think there was a hype when the US market was meant to be open, or like there was these growth, because you all saw the stock kind of spike, and then it kind of like went downhill. So I think right now, as an investor, you should look at what the sheets are like when they like, don't just invest because it's cannabis. Do your homework, invest in the LP or LPs, or even ETF, like the cannabis ETF that you're most comfortable with. So all that to say, so like, I think I was just as shocked as everyone else how quick it went down. But after that, looking at the numbers, everything else, it makes sense that at some point, like I think those big hedge funds or whatever, they won't want to invest as much if you're always in the negative and you don't get back. So it's a matter of kind of seeing which big LPs can get out of that bad situation that they're in right now, because let's not go around it. A lot of them are facing like challenges. It's a matter of kind of seeing what they come up with and how they can stabilize the whole supply chain. And I think in 2022, what I'm expecting is things will either stabilize or go slightly up. You'll see that trend for some of them. Some of them, unfortunately, will go down if they don't do better and they just like they don't know how to get out of that hole. But I'm thinking things are like stabilizing, and I think one of the things that also hurts MJ that I've seen is like, the trend of all the meme stocks and things like that. I think the new people who are newly investors, they expect it to go too fast, too high, too fast. Sorry. And at the end of the day, it's a long put. Like you don't look every day to say, man, I'm going to be rich. Like I don't think that's the goal.
It doesn't happen overnight. Yeah.
No, and so you need to invest in something you believe in, and that it's going to be maybe a 1 year to 3 year investment, and then you just kind of let it
set realistic expectations, right?
Exactly, and that's why so like new investor at first, like one of the mistakes I did was to try to invest to a lot of the LPs. And after a while, I was like, man, you know what? I'm going to invest into a ETF instead, because I don't know. I don't have the time to inspect all the sheets that are coming out and everything that's
actively
going on.
Manage
and then,
it.
Exactly. And then I'm going to maybe focus on 1 or 2 LP where I do my homework and I kind of take that time, right? So all that to say, even though right now it's not exciting because it's kind of either stagnant or going down, or like it's not the most positive, I think in the future, with regulation changing, with the mindset changing, there are rooms that it will go up. But I would be very surprised if it skyrockets. Like it's a few years type of thing, in my opinion.
So in your opinion, 2022, we might see the reversal and that curve, and then it may be into 2023 and beyond, we start to see that real parabolic move. That
value, exactly. Yeah. So that's where I'm not. I don't have my magic
ball,
but that's no. But that's what I've seen, and the trend, like in Quebec and other provinces, like the trend is still pretty good with the sales, and even though like the numbers of stores are growing, there's a lot of things in play.
Stores are going up.
It's still doing, it's still doing okay. Like I'm not depressed with that. Like when I look at it, I'm like, man, it's still very good. Like,
and I get a lot of people say that MSOs are the best and LPs are that it's no point on owning them, but a lot of people aren't looking at under the hood. You need to kind of look at everything. Like Quebec isn't even allowing edibles, and Ontario only had 200 stores at one point, where Alberta had 600. Now we've got Ontario over 1,000 stores. So these are all growing pains and things that I think that we're holding the market back, that we just don't see in the United States. And then leading up to US legalization, well, in my opinion, again, not financial advice, entertainment purposes only, but I think it would be unwise not to have at least some US exposure leading up to US legalization. Perhaps you have a long-term no-touch account where, you just set it and forget it, and you don't touch it until the US legalizes. That's sort of my strategy. I have multiple accounts. I have a long-term no-touch. I have, a medium and then a day trade account, and then I separate them so that I'm not looking at my long-term account, right? And I think that's what a lot of people get wrong too with MJs. They get involved because of the hype, or their friend tells them about a company or something like that, and they're not really buying into the company because they believe in it or they've done their research. They were told it was a good idea, and they didn't have realistic expectations, like you said.
Exactly.
And then, with such a volatile industry, it's kind of like the crypto market, right? You can't get these 1,000 and 5,000% returns if you aren't able to stomach a 50% downturn, right? And same with MJ. The market right now is very reminiscent of the crypto industry in 2019 and 2020. Nobody wanted anything to do with crypto back then, right? And it was about a 2-year bear market, and it was just brutal, right? And a lot of people lost interest. But it's now when I'm doing the most research, I'm doing a lot of due diligence, I'm looking at up and coming companies and US companies, preparing myself for that next bull run, right? And personally, my strategy is just buy low, sell high, and at 52-week lows, we could go lower. That's obviously a possibility. But in my opinion, I think that we're going to see a lot better days ahead, like you say, into 2022. I agree, into 2023 for sure.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a good learning experience for any new investor too. Like not to always be excited and panic and things like that. It's stocks doesn't have emotion. You set your expectation, and hopefully they're not unrealistic. So you go with that mindset.
If you can manage your emotions in MJ, you can probably do it in any industry.
Exactly.
Basically starting off at like Black Diamond in the investing world, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So as we wrap things up, what's your favorite MJ company, and are you able to share what you hold currently? What would be your top holdings?
Yeah, so, well, I don't want to disclose too much because, of course, I have some of them as my client. But one of the stock that I'm interested in is, well, Hexos is interested in the fact that it went down a lot. So there's that opportunity there if you're feeling it and you're feeling their vision. I think they're in the same position than other big LPs. Like I'm thinking Canopy and things where it's like, man, it's kind of shaky, but like which one will get out of that and be like a phoenix almost. So right now, for me, I'm not investing in any of those big LPs only because of my risk assessment. I'm not a risky guy. I'm more in like more conservative. So one of the play I did make a while back was the Canara stock, which I do overlook. People are very freaky because it keeps going down a little bit. Like it went to 18 cents and then it went down, and like people are like, man, what's happening? But I think there's some potential with their sheets that are like the statements and things they're releasing. To me, it makes sense. I'm not advising anyone to buy that, but to my risk assessment, it does make sense to me. And I do. So other than that, like I do invest into the ETF, the cannabis ETF. I don't remember the symbol.
HMMJ or
yes, yeah. So I invest in that one only because I don't have the time day to day to look at all these companies. There are some companies, I won't name them, but I wish they were IPO, so I would invest in them, but they are not. So there's nothing I can do. So I'm just following. But other than that, in the day-to-day world, I'm mostly an ETF guy. So I'm not the most I don't do any day trading or things like that.
Yeah, you got a lot going on, right? You got a lot
exactly. So I'm very, very laid back with that approach, more of a set and forget. And
that's what I tell people all the time, right? There's no right or wrong way. I get people all the time saying, you were telling me at $2 Hexo was going to go to $1.50. How come you didn't sell and rebuy lower? Well, A, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't, even though the charts are saying it might go lower, we don't know for sure. And I'd much rather be dollar cost averaging into a name or a stock when it's near a 52-week or an all-time low. The old saying goes, time in the market is usually better than trying to time the market.
Exactly.
And it depends. If a stock's at a 52-week high, well, absolutely, I'm going to be looking to sell and reload cheaper, right? But if it's at an all-time low, am I really going to risk 5%? Do I really want to try to get in 5% or 10% cheaper and then miss the move of hundreds of percent, right? So, and then with regards to Cannara, that's a good point too, right? But it's just par for the course, right? Everybody's been sliding, and actually Cannara was holding up pretty good there for a while.
Exactly.
And then I did a video. I'm actually going to be interviewing Nicholas Soziak, the CFO, Chief Financial Officer, here next week. And he reached out to me and he said that video is a little over the top, but the charts, they are what they are, and the charts say what they say. And I made a joke and I said, well, I'd much rather be doing a golden cross video and saying that there's more potential upside, but that just wasn't the case, right? We were seeing that all of MJ was trending lower and Cannara had a death cross, meaning that we could see more downside. And we did drop, right? We dropped 11.5 cents.
It goes back to the point, I think, to the point that you got to be patient with some things, or if you believe, or like set your own limits of what you're comfortable with. But like at the end of the day, my plan as to any stocks I believe in, like I'm in the hydrogen thing. I do like a few other things that are like, I don't know if they're going to pay off, but I'm just investing, set and forget for a couple of years. And I'm like, man, I'm just going to open at that point. I like in a year or two and say, oh, that's cool. Or, oh man, I lost, but it's okay. Like in my mind, it was already processed that way. So on a day to day, like even if there's a debt cross or things are going really wrong, I'm like, man, it's not below my threshold that I saw or something that I should panic. So like, just let it.
And that's something too, right? Having realistic expectations. Again, when you buy something, you have to expect that it's gonna drop, right?
Exactly.
99 times out of 100, you're probably not going to time the bottom. So as long as you can prepare yourself mentally and financially too, right? Maybe you don't just go in 100%, you scale in. So you buy, say, Cannara at 12 cents. Okay, well, I have $1,000 to invest. Maybe I'll buy 500 here. And if it drops to 10 cents, I'll put 500 in. And if it drops to 5 cents, I'll put another 1,000 in. Or I buy and I hold.
And it's the same thing. I invest a lot in the S&P 500.
Yep.
My expectation for that is not for it to move. I'm just saying, like, this is like, I'm okay with that, like lower percentage. I don't know, but it did
double over the last year.
Yeah. So that it was a good one, but I'm not expecting that for.
It doesn't happen very often.
Right? No. Exactly, and it will go down. And that's fine. So it's things like that I think you got to keep in mind.
Well, the more you have in your tool belt, right? The more hands you have in different. You don't want to over diversify either, because then you can stretch yourself too thin. But for example, I first started to invest in mutual funds, right? I don't know a single person that ever got rich off mutual funds in my lifetime. But then I looked into real estate, right? And I looked at stocks and crypto was basically my main focus in 2017 and 2018. And that's how I thought I was going to accumulate massive amounts of wealth. But little did I know that COVID was going to be a thing, and that the real estate market was going to, over double in a few years. So, the least thing that I expected to really see, like you said, you bought the S&P 500, just expecting a slow and steady, and here we are, it's over doubled in a little over a year, right? That's really something that's never happened before.
Yeah. I think it's just for a new investor. Don't expect this to happen every single time. No, be happy when it does.
But be happy with it,
yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Cool.
All right, well, that's pretty much all I had for today, Alexandre. So we'll just finish things up, I guess. Just a couple of questions. Where do people find out more information about you if they want to learn more information about you, get in contact with you, or learn more about Analyse Cannabis?
So they can go on quebec.weedcrawler.ca. Where they will see what I'm all about. So it's mostly LP focused. But if you want to go on if you're a customer and you're more curious about what's happening, the sales and everything, you can go on quebec.weedcrawler.ca. And that's actually a free portal. You can view the best sellers in Quebec. You can view what's happening.
You can reach to me on social media on Reddit. So I'm u/Zenilko, Xenilko. I do post on the DOCS, SQDC, so you'll see me up there. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to discuss, or if you have any questions, I'm always happy to chime in.
Absolutely. And I know you got a lot on your plate, but anything else you're working on? Any other exciting projects other than that?
Yeah, so currently, best bang for your bud for the rest of Canada. So where you can set your location. So if you're in Moncton or like anywhere in Canada, you just set your location and you'll find all the dispensaries around you. And you can click on the product and then it will compare price of the dispensaries around you. So I'm working on that, more consumer facing for the consumers. Other than that, no, my day-to-day job it keeps me busy enough. So, and I have 2 young children also, so I have enough on my plate.
I'll have to check that out. Bestbangforyourbud.ca.
.com.
.com. Okay.
Yeah, for that.
No, that's awesome. That's really smart because you have the Analyse Cannabis, which is more tailored toward the licensed producers. Exactly. And then you've got the customer facing bestbangforyourbud.com.
Exactly. So that was always the goal, to help the community. Like my goal has always been to help it's kind of helping MJ just with helping the community getting more to know what's going. And to be honest, it also does help the dispensaries when you think about it. It's a little bit like having a gas station and knowing what's around you, having a pulse of all the other things around you. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think people are going to find value in that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, that's pretty much all I had for today. Thanks so much for meeting with me today. That was a lot of fun, and hopefully we can continue our discussions again in the future.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. All right.
Any questions for me before we head out?
No, I just continue. I really always happy to see what you're coming up with. Like all the videos, continue your great work. I think what you're doing for the community is much needed. So that's a good thing. And yeah, so thank you for taking the time and actually reaching out to me. That was really cool of you. And I look forward to discuss with you again.
Absolutely. Well, I consider myself a community enthusiast as well, and just a pioneer, for lack of a better word, in the MJ industry. And I would consider yourself to be a pioneer as well. And we need a lot of people like us, especially with such a stigmatized industry, right? That has been decades of this social stigma that we have to work together with big business. That was a conversation that we had at MJ BizCon, and a topic of concern was how to amalgamate the two, how to get the culture of cannabis merged with big business, right? Yeah. And that's I think a huge challenge that we have ahead of us. But again, more people like us in the community, I think we're in good hands.
Yeah, I agree.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Alexander.